Welcome, everyone. I'm Sarah Bowers-Peter, the Program Coordinator for Crime Stoppers Guelph Wellington. Thank you for joining us tonight for week 2 of the Crime Stoppers Guelph Wellington series with Victim Services Wellington's Executive Director, Liz Kent. This series is part of our Crime Stoppers Month awareness, and we are happy to have you here. At this time, I'd like to introduce Alex Bojan, our Secretary of the Crime Stoppers Guelph Wellington Board of Directors, with a few words.
Perfect. Thanks, Sarah. So on behalf of the board, I just want to thank Liz for joining us as a guest speaker on our second episode of the CSGW Series. Victim Services Wellington provides an incredibly important service to our community, and we truly value the support between our programs. So I'm looking forward to learning a lot tonight. But for now, I'll pass it back to Sarah for a more in-depth introduction. But again, thank you, Liz, so much for joining us.
That's great. Thank you so much, Alex. All right, a few words about Liz. Liz Kent moved to Southwestern Ontario, all the way from a small northern community called, and you're going to have to help me, Liz, Madawaska.
True, yep.
Excellent. To attend the University of Guelph. She was then hired part-time at Wyndham House, and the role evolved into many different positions over the course of 14 years, including the instrumental role of opening Wyndham House Males Program. In 2001, Liz arrived at Victim Services Wellington, where she currently holds the title of Executive Director. Liz is a recipient of the Women of Distinction Award from 2014 and the Attorney General's Victim Services Award of Distinction in 2017. She was instrumental in the startup of the Project Lifesaver program and the mobile emergency response system in the city of Guelph and County of Wellington. And on a personal note, she's one of my favorite people that I've come to know through Crime Stoppers Guelph Wellington, so I have a huge personal bias. Thank you for being here tonight, Liz.
Thanks for having me.
Why don't we start off with perhaps you giving us an understanding of how Victim Services is structured and how it's funded?
So we are structured, we have a board of directors, we're a nonprofit agency. A lot of people don't think that we are a not-for-profit. A lot of the people think that we are a government agency because we do get some government funding. We're funded through the Ministry of the Attorney General. Our structure is there's a board of directors, then there's the executive director, myself, and then for a long time, I've had 2 full-time staff, but right now, in November, we ended up hiring another full-time staff. So now we have 3 full-time staff, and I have 2 part-time staff that do the Project Lifesaver program. And then our program is 24/7, and it's 24/7 because of the fact that we usually have around anywhere between 90 and 100 volunteers between Guelph and Wellington County. So they cover a lot of the after hours and go on scenes. We couldn't do it without our volunteers.
I hear you there. A lot of us non-for-profits are in the same boat, right?
Yeah.
So you work very closely with Wellington County OPP and Guelph Police Services. Are there any other agencies that you're closely aligned with?
Crime Stoppers.
Of course. But as far as your responsiveness and the agencies that you would take calls from, are there any other agencies?
So probably about 95% of our calls come from either the Ontario Provincial Police Wellington or Guelph Police Service. We do take calls from other emergency services, so we can be called out by the fire department if there's a fire, or we can be called out by a lot of the times we'll get called to emergency departments to assist. So if there's been somebody who has lost a loved one and needs some support, we may be called to the hospital to help out that way.
Great, thank you for clarifying that. I know my experience has always been with you working with police, so that's good for me to understand as well. Now, you have a number of initiatives that fall under your purview, and I know what we just mentioned was Project Lifesaver and Mobile Emergency Response Service. Can you explain a little bit about those 2 initiatives?
Yeah, Project Lifesaver is one of my, I think this is one of the best programs out there, to be honest. In Guelph, a long, long time ago, probably, I don't even want to think about how many years ago, probably 15, 16 years ago, we had a woman that went missing. And she was elderly, and she went missing from Riverside Glen. And the police searched for her for a very long time. And everybody knows that when we have a missing person, the longer it takes to locate them, the more worrisome it gets. So this woman was in her 80s, and 21 hours later, she was located out by Guelph Lake. So the officers on scene, and they had to call in the helicopter from OPP, horses, dogs, volunteers, police overtime, was quite a lot. So that search probably cost almost $500,000 in the end, when you tally up all the cost of it. So one of the inspectors in the Guelph Police Services started looking into other options, because our society, we knew that our society was going to become a lot more older, and there was going to be a need. So long story short, they found this program in the States called Project Lifesaver, and I approached Wellington County OPP, who immediately were on board. And I think we were number 7th in Ontario. So we weren't very far from being one of the first ones. I think we were either 5th or 7th. So our program started in 2011. So basically what it is it's a transmitter, and the police have search and rescue equipment that locate the transmitter. So if anybody has any cognitive ability, like disadvantage, so whether it be dementia, Alzheimer's, we've had people with a brain injury, kids with autism who have the tendency to run, anybody who has the tendency to wander qualifies for the program. So we usually sit between 40 and 52 people on that program, and our average search time for the police to locate somebody once they have the equipment on scene, which is the last place the person was seen, is 26 minutes.
That's remarkable, Liz. I mean, just from the vulnerability time that you've cut down, not to mention resources that are being saved from a dollar sense, as well as a a staffing perspective. That's tremendous. And
Yeah.
and do you have any idea of how many people that you've actually been able to retrieve, or I'm not sure what the proper word would be there, to rescue through Project Lifesaver?
Yes, I'm sure we're well over the 20 mark now. Well over the 20 mark, for sure. We had one search in the county that was in the gorge, actually. And it was January, it was cold out. The officers couldn't get to the person because they were down the gorge. And luckily, they had to call the fire department in to rappel down. And after that call, I got a call from the inspector saying this would not have been a rescue had we not had that equipment. It would have been probably in the spring, maybe they would have located the person. So it's a program that helps save lives. And a lot of people will say to me, well, you're with Victim Services, and what does this program have to do with you? And what I say to people is, if you've ever sat with somebody that has had a loved one missing, you never want to do that again. You talk to parents who have a child go out of their sight for 5 minutes, and the panic that people feel when you have a loved one missing for a period of time. So even though it's a preventative program, and we're Victim Services, it was the right thing to take that program on.
I totally understand where you're coming from with that, because and that's kind of where you and I have been like-minded, because we've been able to make our programs more proactive, which is so important to be able to have that prevention and reduce the risk to the community, which is what it's really all about, right?
Absolutely.
And then about Mobile Emergency Response Service, what can you tell us about that program?
Yes. So years ago, there was a program that was called the Domestic Violence Emergency Response System, and it was free, and it was through ADT. So if we had any victims that were criminal harassment, stalking, domestic violence victims, we could provide them with an alarm that was in their home. After about 20 years of doing this program, ADT canceled that program. So we had to work with the Guelph Police and the Ontario Provincial Police and figure out a way to do this program. And we found this system called Eyes On. And the one thing that makes the program better than the old program is people are able to be mobile. So the other program was an alarm in your house, and it was only good in your house. This is actually a little black box, and if you press the button, it calls a call center with your GPS location, so your latitude and longitude. So if we have a domestic violence victim who is driving from Guelph to Fergus because she lives in Fergus, and she notices that she's being followed, she can press this button. Police will be notified, and then police already will look it up. They'll realize that she has this system, and they'll recognize it as a high-risk call.
And again, another great example of prevention, right? I totally appreciate that. But prevention, I mean, we would love to have that be more of what you do, but the fact of the matter is you do a lot of responsive work. Can you maybe give us an example of what it looks like when you're engaged and the process that you go through, certainly respecting, privacy and all of that stuff. But if you can give us an understanding of what it looks like when victim services is called to an occurrence.
Yeah. So like I was saying, we're 24 hours, 7 days a week. So for an example, if we had a call out right now, we would have a team leader that would be on call right now. The police would call the number. It would go to the team leader. The team leader would take down the information. So let's use a domestic as an example. Actually, let's use sudden death as our example. Sudden death are actually our highest call. So the police call the team leader and let them know that there's been a sudden death, and maybe it's a motor vehicle accident. Let's go with a motor vehicle accident. So the volunteers would be told where they are to go. So a lot of the times, if it's a motor vehicle accident, we don't end up at the side of the road. We may end up at the hospital. However, there have been times where our volunteers have been at the side of a road. So it really depends on where the police are at in their investigation, where the victims are going to congregate. Sometimes it'll be at somebody's home. So it really depends on where the victims are in the process. So our volunteers go through quite a bit of training. So around grief, our volunteers actually even go to the funeral home to find out what the process is at the funeral home. And, we don't really think about it, but if you've never planned a funeral before, people don't even know where to start. And, how do you find a funeral home? What do you take to the funeral home? How fast do you have to get to a funeral home? What does a coroner do? If the coroner is involved and the body's in Toronto, how does people have a ton of questions. So our kind of motto is education is power. So our volunteers are trained to answer some of those immediate questions and kind of provide practical assistance and immediate support. So whatever they need to do in that time frame, they will do that, but they make an assessment of what those people need long term. So we do a lot of referrals. So with a sudden death, we may give them a list of funeral homes. We may give them hospice information, Bereaved Families of Ontario information, the Coping Center information. If it's a homicide, there's a whole different process that we would go through. We help with the immediate, but we direct into the long term.
From what I'm gathering here, you're such a conduit between services that are already existing and those that are really not in the mind space to be able to access them. And you're absolutely right. There's some people that it would not be difficult to transition through those first couple of hours or make plans or arrangements. And for others, grief is such a varied thing that they wouldn't be capable of dealing with any of that. So that's an amazing service that you're providing. Now I
And
know.
then
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I think it's also, we think that everybody has somebody, and not everybody has somebody. So a lot of the times we will get somewhere and they may have family, but their family. I love this example. We did this. This happened years and years ago, and it has always stuck with me. We had an elderly couple driving through the county to drive up to Collingwood to see the leaves changing in October. They were married 63 years. They got outside of Fergus and he pulled over because he wasn't feeling well, and he died in the car. They were from Kingston. She was in her 80s. They end up at the hospital in Fergus, and we got called in. Their family was from Ottawa. So you can't put this 86 or 87-year-old lady in a car after her spouse is 60 some years passes away beside her. And for her family to get from Ottawa to Fergus was going to take 7 hours, basically. So our volunteers, God bless their soul, drove her halfway, and her family met her halfway. So, we sat with her in the emergency room, the waiting room, and till the doctors were done, and police had assisted her, and then our volunteers took her to her family. So we always think that people have people, but not everybody has somebody.
That's such a beautiful example. That's terrific. But I do know that from our conversations, there is a number of the occurrences that you're called to are actually related to crime. And
Yes.
in time with Crime Stoppers, that's where we first had that moment where it's like there's a connection between Crime Stoppers and victim services. And wouldn't it be helpful if people were able to solve a crime, if not for the victim, then for their families? What does it mean for a victim or their families to know that a crime has been solved?
Oh, okay. You haven't. It's closure. I mean, it just gives you some peace of mind, that it ties it all together. It's very important. I talk to people all the time who, wonder. We had one family who had a break and enter, and a lot of people will think, oh, it was a break and enter. Well, when you have your home broken into, it's a violation of your personal space, and it's very unsettling. And we had one family who sold their house. It was their dream house, and they sold their house because of this break and enter. The person was caught. They weren't caught right away. It took them a few months to catch the person. He had done multiple break-ins. But the funny part of the story was 2 years later, the house came back on the market and the family bought it back. And I'm not sure that they would have bought it back had that person not been arrested.
That's a great example of closure right there. That's amazing. Well, and I know you were kind enough to work with me on a video a number of years ago where we talked about, grief and closure and what it means to people to have that opportunity, because really, you mentioned break and enter. Well, there's no victimless crime. Regardless of the crime, there is always a victim. Now, on the broad scale, if it's like a public, it could be the municipality or something like that, which I know is not within the realm of what we're talking about here tonight. But there is a certain bias about what qualifies as a crime, and a victim, and that description can be blurry. So I'm really glad you shed some light on that. I also feel at times that people think, that's a real disconnect with people that have information about a crime. I'm not going to give that information. Why would I do that? Put myself out there. And I've been, reminding people, and even in promoting tonight, that there is a victim of crime, and it will help with closure and moving on. Even when we've got outstanding cases, and we've talked about that, you and I, before as well, there's a lot of cases in our community that are unsolved, that somebody knows something, and there are still people out there that are very much hurting. And if they could get that last piece of the puzzle, as we always say, and allow an investigator to effect an arrest, it would just bring that whole experience that next step in the process.
Well, and if we keep on saying nothing, eventually we're going to be that victim.
Very good point as well. Absolutely. Because they're not going to discriminate and say, oh, well, you know, they know something, but they're not saying anything, so I'll stay away from them. No, it's, you know, a criminal doesn't discriminate that way.
At
Absolutely.
all.
So I don't think people understand the connection further with our two organizations, but Crime Stoppers would never have moved into human trafficking awareness as soon as we did without the work that you have done with victim services. And to explain a little bit, you hosted a workshop, I'm going to say 4 or 5 years ago now.
2017.
There you go. And where you offered professional human trafficking, specifically sex trafficking training to police, health professionals, and partnering agencies such as Crime Stoppers. And I will never forget the feeling I had after that first day, because it was a 2-day event. I was just so angry about learning and understanding what this crime did to people. So for us, you know, thank you very much at Crime Stoppers for bringing that forward. However, you know, we've been talking about it forever. We've got a dedicated presentation. You know, we still have people who think human trafficking, again, sex trafficking, is not happening in our communities. What are your thoughts about that?
I get it all the time. Well, that doesn't happen here. I was in a meeting with somebody that had supported our agency, has supported our agency for 20 years. And one day we were in a meeting, we were planning a golf tournament. And I said, the golf tournament was the next day. And I said, I have to go. I have to have this human trafficking victim flown out to BC for treatment. And he said, where's the victim from? I'm like, Sudbury, North Bay, Fergus. And he was like, oh, that doesn't happen here. And we went to the golf tournament the next day, and during that golf tournament, he was telling people about our conversation. He said that he had no idea, after 20 years of supporting our agency, that we did stuff like that. And it was amazing to look out and see the faces of people who had no idea it was going on in our community.
Yeah, a total disconnect happening there. And there's, again, more awareness and education that you're trying to do to prevent having these victims that you end up dealing with, right?
It was, you know, Guelph is such a great place to live, and Wellington County is such a great place because we work together, right? So that conference that you're talking about, when I first booked that conference, it was a grant through one of the governments, and it was actually Guelph Police Service that had the grant. We expected 110 people if we were lucky, and we started advertising this conference, and then it went to 150, and then it went to 175, and then it went to 195, and then the police chief came to me and said, I want so and so to go. And I was like, and we just made it for people in our area. We didn't advertise it outside of our area. We wanted it to be local because it was a localized human trafficking plan that we wanted to come up with. And the hall held 210 people. And at 207 people, I had to call it a day. But it was so amazing to see from all different kinds of agencies, employment agencies, Crime Stoppers, the hospital, to school boards, to you name it. People were there, police services, victim services, housing, Ontario Works. Like, it was so neat to see everybody come together.
And it really did bring together agencies that I think we didn't even know existed. It was kind of like, oh, you're doing that too, or you're another option. And again, that's such an amazing gift that you have, and being able to find out where we could fit in that whole rainbow of action that really ended up. And I remember that exercise where we were pulled up and said, what can you do to help with this? And of course, you know, Crime Stoppers is not the police. We're not an investigative agency. We can't get involved, and we're certainly not going to engage with a victim. That's not what we do. But what we can do is awareness. And that so became part of the mandate moving forward. The board of directors was very much, yep, we're gonna move forward with this and create the awareness within the community. We've taken tips on human trafficking. which is awesome and awful all at the same time. But the fact is, the engagement is there, and it comes back to working with victim services, because you also have the vision of crime prevention, really.
100%.
All right. I mean,
And that's the one thing. I mean, that's the one thing where the Crime Stoppers is invaluable, is the fact that you're into the schools and you're doing the education. We're doing the work with the victims. I honestly, Sarah, I don't have the time to do what you do. So the fact that you do it, and you do it so well, and have such a wide range of audience, that's why we work together.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. And it's a challenging this year because of everything being so different, but, we're still looking to engage with our schools. It's still very much a part of our mandate. And I always have had a very interesting response to either the human trafficking presentation or the EPAC presentation, where we bring the parents and the kids together, right, for that conversation about, social media and trafficking and how that connects. But in referencing what 2020 has been like, because I could talk about human trafficking for the rest of the hour, and I know we wouldn't cover everything, but I want to make sure we do justice to victim services here. 2020 was a lot. I know we've talked about that before. What role has COVID-19 played in the work that you're doing, and how you do it?
First of all, it's awful. Our volunteers go out on scene. They help people in person. To try to assist somebody that has just had their child commit suicide over the phone is horrific. Impossible. Hard. We've had to do training with our volunteers on how to do phone support. So our services are still available, but they're like everybody else's services. They're remote. So that has certainly been not the best. However, having said that, our calls are up 35% this year. Between 30 and 35. We've had to hire a full-time person, and I'm happy to say that full-time person, her name is Lauren, and she's working out of the Tiviadale office in the county. So we now have a full-time county. I've been at Victim Services 19 years, and we've never had a full-time. We used to have somebody part-time in the county, and then it got even more part-time. So I'm thrilled that we have now this person that is full-time in the county. So this year's changed everything.
And the calls, without, again, with respecting privacy, is it, are you being called out to domestic situations, or are we looking at mental health suicide type calls? Where is the increase?
Well, we've seen a lot of sudden death calls again, and domestic violence calls. Those are the two calls that are the highest for us. And again, we're not going out to provide the support. We're just doing it remotely. And even with like domestic violence victims, we do a lot of safety planning. So even the safety planning is either done over the phone or done like this. So it's totally different. But yeah, I mean, it's totally changed the way everything happens. And our court systems are backlogged. They're doing remote stuff now, but you can see a domestic violence victim, and it's 8 months in to the time that they've reported the crime, and it's still not very far ahead. So yeah, everybody's been affected by it.
Well, especially those agencies like yourself that have need that in-person, or benefit from that in-person interaction, that you're so much more effective. So hopefully we're able to get things. Now, currently we're recording this during the lockdown in early 2021. In regular pandemic terms, are you able to engage a little more, or is it pretty much across the board? It's been the same since March of 2020 that you've not been able to engage at all.
So we actually, we had a lot of our volunteers saying to us, when are we going back out? When are we going back out? So we actually went back out. I'm going to say we went back out in July. And we were out on scenes from July until the 1st of December. And then we pulled everybody back just to be on the safe side. We want to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. And we want, we want our volunteers to be safe. We want the victims to be safe. We want our police services to be safe. So, but we are itching to get back to normal.
Sure, absolutely. Now, COVID, but would there be other significant challenges facing victim services that you can think of, or really is COVID pretty much it?
Yeah, I mean, the increased calls does not make it for, we never get good calls. They're never happy calls. So I think right now the other struggle is when people call, before COVID, our calls were taken 15, 20 minutes. The more difficult ones were maybe, 30 minutes. Now, when you get somebody on the phone, they want to talk. They're lonely, they're isolated. They don't have one issue, they have, 10 issues. So our calls are taking a lot longer too.
Yeah, you're not dealing with an isolated incident. You're dealing with someone who's endured months of extraordinary times, with this being kind of the cherry on that sundae, so to speak, right? A more traumatic event on top of other traumas. That makes sense.
I also think that it's great that we all say that we're still doing our work and we're here for you and rah, rah, look at us go. But when push comes to shove, the services aren't the same. And shelters have gone to a 50% capacity because they have to follow COVID regulations, and counseling. Counseling is good. Again, it's virtual, and some people like the virtual world, but not everybody. And not everybody in the county has access to the virtual world. So there's certain obstacles that are really difficult for people.
That's a valid point, is accessibility to those services by virtue of technology and internet and all of that stuff that complicates it. Do you have any stats for 2020 that you can share with us, Liz?
Yes, I was going to look those up. I forgot.
Well, you just say you know that your calls are up from last year.
We know I know. We know our calls are up over 30%. The other program that we run is called a Victim Quick Response Program. And we provide financial assistance to victims. It's not that we give victims money, but we can get things done for them. So for an example, if somebody in the county has a domestic and they need their locks changed and they can't afford to do so, we can change their locks. So we arrange for the person to go in, and then we pay that person. If they need some safety features like bars for the windows or sensor alarms, we can provide those. If there's a waiting list for counseling, we can actually provide, we can pay that counselor to do counseling. If we have somebody in if we have somebody in Palmerston who needs to come to Guelph for counseling, and it's free counseling, but they can't afford the gas money, we can provide them with a gas card. So that program, last year at this time, I think we had 40 victims that we had assisted, and I think right now we're at 62. So that program has increased a lot this year too.
Wow, that's remarkable, just to see that kind of increase in one program. That's
and we've
go ahead.
So one of the things that we can do is with human trafficking victims, we have the ability to arrange for treatment for them. So we can send somebody to a treatment program through that program. Just before I got on the call, I was talking to one of the officers about one of the girls being branded. So we can actually do tattoo removal if somebody's been branded. So
that's
that
such an important part of healing as well, right? Is providing them with whatever they need to get past it. And in the case of trafficking, you're absolutely right that having that mark on their body is huge.
Yeah. So our numbers have definitely gone up across the board, and the length of the calls have gotten to be a lot longer.
So do you think that this is a projection, like looking forward into the future, calls are going to be increasing, especially now that you've got someone in the county that's dedicated to county responses? Where do you see victim services in the future?
I don't see us being less busy, unfortunately. I think as we get back out into the world and people are allowed to be out and about, I think that we're going to see an increase for a little while. I think people who would have left during a normal time may have stayed because of COVID-19 and the fact that, again, the services aren't what they used to be, even though we like to say we are. I think you'll see people leaving, and I think that there's going to be a financial stress on people. And financial stress is not good on relationships. It brings out the worst in people. So I think it's going to be a try. I think the next few years will be trying.
Absolutely. So we're just about to move into our question and answer session for our guests here. But before we go into that, maybe you can share the website and any social media platforms for victim services.
Really?
Yes,
Yeah.
really.
Yes, we have a website.
You can tell Liz is the person who's frontline and dealing with the people, and she's not worrying about all the promotion and the background noise, which is what I love about you, because you're a get your hands dirty kind of gal. So I apologize for putting you on the spot with that one.
Yeah, probably not the best executive director, because I would rather doing the work that everybody else is doing rather than all the other stuff. So our website is www.vswguelph.on.ca. And then we are on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram.
And you guys are so great with helping us promote Crime Stoppers, that we appreciate it. It's all about helping each other, right? With the promotion and awareness, for sure.
We could not do what we do if we did not have the partnerships in the community that we have. That's the bottom line.
Absolutely. All right, if there are any questions, maybe we'll take a couple of moments and Liz can answer those for you. Is there anyone who would like to ask Liz some questions? Everybody's trying to figure out how to unmute themselves. Maybe talk about fundraising. I know you just received some funding from 100 Women Who Care Rural Wellington. That was a tremendous gift. I know that that was just not too long ago, earlier in 2020.
I think we got the money in July. We met to exchange the check or the checks, and we had a paddle in between us, and she was handing me the checks, and we had our masks on, and we asked somebody to take our picture. So somebody's taking our picture, and we're all laughing because we're smiling.
And I guess
we're like, nobody's going to see us smiling, but here we're all behind the masks smiling.
So what are you going to use those funds for, Liz?
So we are down in volunteers. So like I said, normally in Guelph and Wellington, we have anywhere between 75 and 100 for sure. To be honest, having around 85 is ideal. We have 2 volunteers on at a time in the county and in the city. So we have 4 volunteers on. So having a lot of volunteers to be able to go to calls so that we are available is important to us. So we're going to do some advertising in the county and use some of that money for recruitment in the county, for sure, 100%. We really are looking at getting some more volunteers in the county as soon as this situation gets better. We will be doing a training for sure.
And what kind of skills would you be looking for in a volunteer? That might be a great opportunity to share that.
We all of our volunteers are very different. We have a group of volunteers who want to be police wannabes. So they're volunteering because they want to further their career and they want to get into policing. And it's amazing that if they take our training, they're going into their policing career knowing what we are. So that always helps. But again, you hate to lose them. So and then we have another group of volunteers who are in the retired part of their life and want to give back, and they they volunteer. So our volunteer age range is like 21 to probably almost 75. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And they come from all different walks of life. We have a retired banker, we have a retired nurse, retired teacher, quite a few different. So we're not looking for any actual specific kind of person. We want them to be caring. We want them to be able to listen. We do quite a few hours of e-learning, and we've done that the last few years. We have 48 victim services across Ontario. So we wanted to standardize the training. So all of our e-learning is done by each victim services, so it's consistent across the board. And then we complement the e-learning by having community agencies come in and talk to us. So we'll have Women in Crisis in, we'll have the funeral home in, mental health in. So we'll have all these community agencies that we refer to in to train the volunteers. The hospital, the sexual assault and domestic violence unit, Betty from the hospital. So yeah, so we do all this training, and then we do ongoing training throughout their volunteering.
And that's excellent. And it's so great that you have a range of ages and backgrounds, because there is no one type of victim. So it's wonderful to have a responsive volunteer that, you know, you can match them up or give an option for someone. That's terrific. I do have a question here in the chat that I'll read to you. It's, although we have some amazing services and supports in Guelph Wellington, what are we missing? Is there something you've heard of in other areas that you see a need for here in our community?
Yeah, it was really funny. I talked earlier about the conference that we had, the HT conference that Sarah referred to. And at that conference, a woman approached me from the Elora Road Baptist Church. And she said to me, if you could have anything you wanted, what would you have? What would you ask for victims of human trafficking? And I was like, housing, housing. We need housing. We need somewhere for them to go. Anyway, 6 months later, she contacted me and she said, would you like to be on a committee? And I would say within 14 months, Elora Road Baptist Church, they have a home for human trafficking victims. So for me, it's housing. We have such a shortage of housing. Our shelter is always full, and then you call all the other shelters around and they're full. And we can put people in hotels through the Victim Quick Response Program, but if it's a human trafficking victim, a hotel is not the place where we should be putting HT victims. So, there's options, but they're not the best options. But housing is probably our biggest issue across the board. I can say that for Guelph and Kitchener and Waterloo, everywhere.
It seems like it's more of a provincial issue, but certainly localizing it, we could use more here. Absolutely.
100%.
Is there anyone else that has a question you'd like to speak up or provide it in the chat? You're welcome to do so now. Oh, we have a part 2. What are the hours of commitment? I'm going to suggest that that's probably for volunteering, if you're making a volunteer commitment. And have you reached out to working community groups like OW and housing to help? So let's answer part 1. What's the commitment for a volunteer?
So we're really flexible. Our team leaders volunteer more hours, and our team leaders are experienced volunteers. So our direct service volunteers have to volunteer 4 shifts a month, and they're 8-hour shifts. So they are 7 to 3, 3 to 11, and 11 to 7. So you're on call. So you carry your cell phone, and you may very well not get called out on your shift. So you can go about your daily life and do your grocery shopping and those kind of things. Just if you get called out, you may have to leave your full cart at the grocery store. But it's quite flexible. So you can still do what you need to do. And then you always go out with somebody else. You never go out by yourself. And the reason why we only take calls from usually emergency services is because we want to make sure where our volunteers are going is safe.
Fair enough. Now, part two, have you reached out to working community groups like OW and housing to help?
Yes, yes. And the drop-in center, I mean, we do have people now looking at supportive housing, which I think is awesome. And I think COVID-19 has kind of pushed the envelope for it. I think it has kind of brought to light how important it is to have housing. And I know that during COVID-19, they had a lot of people staying in hotel rooms, so that they had a place to be safe and they had a place where they weren't going to get sick. So I think that that's kind of helped push the envelope. But that's one of our biggest issues right now.
All right. Another question. Have you seen, sorry, have you seen The Honeybee, a movie produced here in Ontario that relates to human trafficking? I recommend it as a great community outreach.
No, I have not, but I've written it down already.
There you go. There you go. Excellent. Thank you for that. And last call for questions. Just make sure everybody has an opportunity. All right. Well, I'm going to say thank you so much, Liz, for your time this evening. I have an even greater appreciation for your organization and, of course, for you, all the work that you do. One more time, can you tell us how to get in touch with Victim Services Wellington if people want to volunteer or if they want to donate?
So if they want to volunteer, we have an application on the website, www.csgwguelph.on.ca, or you can just Google Victim Services Wellington. It'll come up. Our phone number is 519-824-1212, extension 7304. And if you want to give us a call, we will definitely be there or here at home.
Once again, thank you, Liz Kent, our Executive Director for Victim Services Wellington. Remarkable evening, some amazing information. And if you are interested, please check them out and see if it's something that'll be a good volunteer fit for you. Finally, I would be remiss if I didn't remind you that Crime Stoppers Guelph Wellington takes tips 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Yes, even during a shutdown. You can call us at 1-800-222-TIPS or provide a web tip at www.csgw.tips. Remember, your tip could be the missing piece of the puzzle. Good night.